I'll redo the intro. I felt no one was prepared for me. The music wasn't ready. So I'm just gonna hide behind this chair right now. And then I want all of you guys to clap when I do my intro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage, incredibly funny and handsome, Simi Arif. Yay! Oh, okay, it's going long. Okay. Oh. Does that... It's definitely not an Indian guy behind the desk of the sound, because that would have been a better song. I know what some of you guys are thinking right now. Look at that chubby, Indian-looking guy. Is this my first viewing of a Gupta? If it is, I want his autograph. I realized I put on too much weight. I know I'm a Gupta. Look, she's recording it. I'm going international, investigating journalism. 3 courses down. Take everything on your cell phone. So I'm here. I wasn't meant to be here. I got a phone call. It said we're looking for someone that was a journalist that now does comedy to come speak to other journalists. And then I was like, I'm sorry, Professor Anton Harber, do you know what my marks were when I graduated from journalism? And he was like, no. I was like, oh well, here we go. It was said when I did journalism, one of my lecturers said, you actually make a better comedian than a journalist. She's no longer a journalist, I'm still a comedian, so things are going pretty well on my side, you know what I'm saying? Thank you. 2 people agreed with me. I'm here, and apparently I found out more about your themes. It was very expensive to get a ticket here. As you can see, comedy doesn't pay well. The jeans are tight, I am fat, we've got it, we're going with it. But like, I understand that autocrats is a big theme. I don't understand what an autocrat was, because back home in South Africa, we don't call them autocrats. We just call it the President of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. That is our autocrat. That's how I see it. That's how I see it. And I get worried about my country every single day. I'm worried what's happening in Zimbabwe. I love Zimbabwe. Don't get me wrong, but I liked it from a distance. We've got our own problems. You know, like our biggest problem now, there's a bunch of Indian guys at Saxonville Shabin controlling our government, you know? That's our problem. Now my next problem is there's a 91-year-old Zimbabwean man coming to sleep over here in this country. I've seen Robert Mugabe. First thing he did, there's a coup going on. There's my man. Someone tell Grace, tap the guy. Hey man, come on. Grace can't come here. Grace Mugabe, she can't come here. A couple months back, one of her sons was playing around with a girl in a hotel room. My God. She went full mother. She took it in an extension cord, just started whooping the child. Pah, pah. Then she left the country in disguise, which is pretty tough when you're Mugabe, because we know what you look like. It's like we know what's going to happen. Now she's scared to come back here, because we are all waiting with extension cords, just at Joburg International. Come, it's time. But I love it, I love it. I looked at some of the things you guys attended. You guys attended data courses, data capturing. No one knows what it is still, to this day. They gave me a data course. I graduated in 2012. I did not know a single thing then. They said, open up an Excel spreadsheet. Nah, mate, close that Excel spreadsheet. I know, guys get keen. I understand. Hey, I'm going to put a couple of numbers on here. Nah, not for me. The one course I would have attended, though, when it said internet searching, how to find people on the internet. You don't need to be an investigative journalist for that. You just need to be my ex-girlfriend. That's all you need to be. Just employ a jilted lover. That's all you need to do. You want to find out something about a minister that's done something wrong? Get an ex-girlfriend. My ex. She doesn't need, my guys. First of all, I know she stalks me. I know she stalks me because a fake Twitter account, there's someone taking a photo. Must I pose for you better? Global Investigative Journalism Network Awards pose 2017. Oh, now you stop taking the photo. There we go. Another one. There's a guy on his cell phone already, needs the breaking news, needs it. But I have a big thing. So like my ex-girlfriend, right? Find everything. I say the best place to search is not Instagram, Facebook. Go straight to Tinder. If you're on Tinder, that's where all the magic happens. All the magic happens. All the girls that are on Tinder here, about 90% of you have taken photos with a cub lion. I've seen it on Tinder. It is my favorite thing. Indian Muslim girls, I love them. May God bless them. You see, we have a thing in South Africa called the creepy crawly. It is basically a machine that keeps your pool clean. Now I'm starting to think maybe a lot of these foreigners don't have a pool. A pool is a big part of water. We have lots of them in Africa. I spoke to a girl earlier on. She comes from Germany. I was like, what's the best part about South Africa? She said, the sun. I was like, come all year round, girl. I'm waiting for you. Now we have this, we have a thing called a creepy crawly, right? Which is not a Donald Trump. It's just like a creepy. It makes a sucking sound like this. Basically, that is my metaphor for all investigative journalists. Just pick up the muck underneath you. You'll find something there. You will find it. I'm a Bungani. You will find that thing. But I'm glad that we've all been state captured and we're here today, which is a good thing. I did get past a piece of paper, which I need to find, because there's been a few naughty people. Hold on, let me find it. No, that's money. $1. Hold on, I actually can't find it anymore. It's a very important, oh, there we go, found it. Very important piece of paper. The following people, it sounds like you have detention, but it's probably because you've done something wrong and they don't want to embarrass you. They thought, let's send the guy up there, the funny guy, he'll make it funny with their names. This is going to be tough. You guys need to go outside of this venue at some point of your night, right? Before the jewel, after the jewel means party. I keep on forgetting that it's not enough. Where are you from? New York. Oh, you don't know what a jewel is. Come with me. I will show you a jewel tonight. Easy. If there's one thing that I love, journalism. 2013, I dated 2 journalists. 2014, 4 more journalists. 2016, journalists. Best dates. But they never pay their part of the bill. I'll tell you that. They never pay their part of the bill. And I think that's because they don't earn enough yet. Okay, cool. I'm going to read your name out. If it is an embarrassing thing for you, don't put your hand up. I've seen it happen when like guys have done something wrong and then they go, oh, that's me. Anas, Arab guy. Everybody look for around for an Anas right now. Anas. Anas is a wedding. Good Muslim. Bawaki. Yeah, I know, bro. Come on. I looked at the name myself. I'm trying my best up here. Joseph, very easy name. Makanya, Nati, Renu Prez, which really sounds like a very cool name of a Russian president. Somewhere along the line. Raycliffe, Afrikaans man, he's here. Sarwanja. Won't find a Gupta when you need them, eh? Tenwa Magumba and Voloy and Wambao. You guys need to go outside that door at some part of the night, take a left, there's something you need to sign. Maybe it's your life away, maybe you haven't paid for this thing. We are all thinking it here. I mean, come on, we know that you maybe you're like, hey, I can't afford this thing, I'm just gonna hit the duck. I did it many times. I've never paid for things. Ask the other journalists I've dated. So we are here now, we need to celebrate a couple of things. You guys have made it through this week. There is one more day, so enjoy your life. There's one more day of journalism, one more day of data capturing, but for now we're here at the awards. So I need to welcome, but to practice the welcome, we need to start a clap to get everybody in the mood. So we need someone to lead the crowd. No, don't look. No, oh, thank you. Okay, Prof, yes, that's you. You start the crowd. It's going to go all the way back, get to you, handsome dude. You look like you're in a Bollywood movie before. That's how handsome you are. Going to go to you, gentle brother. It's going to go all the way back. You guys are going to go crazy. And I want to introduce David Kaplan for you. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. There we go. Let's bring it. No, not yet, David. Clap. Please welcome Mr. David Kaplan. Yay!
Oh, I can't follow that act. Oh, dear. Thank you, Semi. Okay, let me get my notes here. Let me bring it down a level if you don't mind. Wow, look at all of you. 1,200 strong from 130 countries. Thank you all for coming, everybody. We've got over 100 million impressions on Twitter for the past couple of days, everybody. It's pretty impressive. Look, I won't run through all these thank yous again, except one. I would like you to thank once again the Wits University and GIJN staffs for all their hard work in making this come together. Forgive me, some quick housekeeping, folks. Lost and found. Go to the registration tent, the little marquee, if you've lost anything. Airport transfers. If you're leaving from hotels, the buses leave at 6 a.m. So check out of your hotel and get on the bus. If you're not leaving from your hotels, come on to campus. We've got a great half day. I know it's Sunday and some of you want to shop. Wait until the afternoon. We've got some awesome stuff planned. Check out of the hotel, bring your luggage, and we'll see you here. You can store your bags, again, at the registration tent, okay? So we're making it easy. And buses will leave from Wits until 3 p.m., okay? Good. Where am I here? I think I'm supposed to introduce one of my colleagues so that she can start with the awards presentations. No? Where am I, Sarah? It's been a long weekend. Just bear with us. We're going straight to the keynote. Okay. We did rehearse. I haven't slept for a long time, and then we played some music last night. Just bear with me. I got a lot more interviews today than any other day. They like the band. Thank you, Muckrakers. Okay, so we were looking for someone to deliver at this time of you know, backlash and tough conditions in so many countries, who could paint the big picture for us. And we turned to our dear friend Anya Schifrin at Columbia University, who happens to be married to a Nobel Prize winner in economics. He is, I think, the smartest guy I've ever interviewed. He's also as friendly as your favorite uncle. It was just a delightful experience. I wondered, I was looking at his bookshelf at Columbia University, and it was a whole wall full of different colored books in various languages, and about halfway through the interview I realized he had written them all. The books are in more than 35 languages. He's been an advisor to many foreign governments, to the United Nations, including the climate change panels, to the World Bank, where he was a noted dissenting voice, to the government of Panama until he walked out of a commission because they weren't being transparent. He's just an extraordinary man. We wanted to set it up as an interview in good journalistic form, and for that I turned to his colleague at Columbia University, who is, when we start these conferences, we begin with a core of people whom we turn to advice to all the time. Sheila Coronel is one of my consiglieres. She is the co-founder of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. She really showed how you could take an investigative reporting nonprofit model and do it in a place as tough as the Philippines. She is the academic dean at Columbia University. at the Graduate School of Journalism, and I'm privileged to call her a good friend and advisor. Could I ask Professor Stiglitz and Sheila to come to the stage, please?
Here's the mic. There's one on each.
Thank you so much. Let me just say I've never been welcomed with music before in my life. I don't know about you, Joe. Thank you so much, David Kaplan. But thank you really for putting all of us here together. None of us would be here without the hard work that David Kaplan put together. So I think he deserves another round of applause. It is such a pleasure to be here with you, Joe. We'll have to be a little bit serious here, I think. It's hard to follow that great comic act. But let me start with going back to 2001, which is a very important year for us here at the Global Conference, because it was the first year we had the first Global Investigative Journalism Conference, and we had like 300 journalists from 40 countries. And look at us now. But 2001 was also the year you won the Nobel Prize for economics for your work on information asymmetry. You looked at how markets cannot function efficiently because of unequal access to information. Your work overturned 100 years of economic theory that assumed that information is perfect. So I'd like to get your insights on that, of what this information asymmetry means in terms of, information asymmetries between those governing and those governed. And what is the role of journalism, particularly investigative journalism, in mitigating unequal access to information?
Yeah, well, you really raised a key issue that my work that I got the Nobel Prize for highlighted the fact that markets where there are these unequal access don't work well, that the kind of idea that Adam Smith put forward, that the invisible hand, the individual pursuit of self-interest would lead as if by an invisible hand to the well-being of everybody. What I showed was the reason the invisible hand was invisible was it wasn't there. That is to say that markets were in general not efficient. Well, the notion of asymmetric information in markets is the same as the problem of lack of transparency in politics, that governments often, when they're engaged in bad practices, or corporations, when they're engaged in bad practices, don't want people to know, because if they knew, they wouldn't be able to do it. So secrecy is really at the core of a lot of the bad things that happen. The reason, Americans can't talk for more than 10 minutes, and I haven't made it that long, without mentioning Trump. And it's sort of an obsession with us, just like South Africans can't go 10 minutes without mentioning your state capture here. So the reason that Trump doesn't want us to see his tax returns is that either he did or did not report all his bad things, and whatever way, he's cornered. So the alternative is to keep it secret. So that just highlights the fact of secrecy as an essential ingredient in a lot of the bad things that happen in our society. Well, if you're going to try to correct that dysfunction in our society, you have to have transparency and openness. And that's where investigative journalism comes in. It tries to undo the attempts of those who are doing bad things to try to keep what they are doing secret by investigating it and then putting it out into the public domain.
Do we see the benefits of investigative journalism in, for example, affecting markets? Are there real impacts of investigative journalism on the way markets function?
Oh, very much so. You know, we often think about problems of corruption in the public sector, but there are lots of bad problems in the private sector. You know, you only, for American, what comes to mind is Enron, which was a huge pyramid scheme that was, when you investigated it, you could see that what was going on was a sham. And the most recent example was Bernie Madoff, where investigative journalism sort of laid it bare. Nobody paid attention for a long time until somebody started paying attention to it, and they realized it was a $60 billion pyramid scheme. So these are examples, but these are extreme examples. But there are lots of examples that are not as extreme. But the role of investigative journalism in tobacco, oil, you can go around every major industry where there are bad practices occurring. Food, the role that the food industry has in encouraging children to eat food that is bad for them, leading to childhood obesity. So, as I say, you can't think of an aspect of our society where there isn't a role for investigative journalism. And once you realize that, you realize, you know, you have a deep market here for what you're doing.
We're a growth industry.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately.
Joe, we're in Johannesburg, and you've spent a lot of time in Africa. You were in the 1960s here in Kenya. Can you talk a little more about what you've seen in Africa over the last decades, so many decades that you've been here, and how Africa compares to the rest of the world? For example, we're dealing with problems of globalization, global inequality, and what the changes you've seen over time, and what have journalists done to affect those changes, and where they're not doing enough?
Well, I think the one area where the problems in Africa, you might say, are worse than in some other parts of the world is in the area of natural resources. The area of natural resources is an area that is particularly prone to bad behavior. So much so that there's something called the natural resource curse, that countries that have more natural resources surprisingly grow more poorly, do more poorly than countries with less natural resources. And one of the reasons is that there is a proclivity for what we call rent-seeking, for people trying to appropriate for themselves the benefits of the natural resources. So what I've seen in lots of parts of Africa, the role that investigative journalism has played in making sure that the governments don't do that. So having learned the lesson that in so many parts of the world that there has been this corruption associated with natural resources, it has raised the tentacles in a way. And now, whenever a country like Ghana or Uganda discovers natural resources, they're there looking for it. And even if they don't succeed perfectly, the fact is that they're there and watching so carefully, I think has played an important role in circumscribing the extent of the corruption that occurs.
So one of the things...
one thing, let me say, one of the things that is also exposed in many of these instances, that another side of the corruption often is somebody from the developed countries. So you can't separate corruption in developing countries from corruption in developed countries. There'll be an oil company from the United States that will have bribed some minister. And so, in a way, this is where global investigative journalism becomes very important. That it's important to investigate both the briber and the bribee. Right. And sometimes we only get half the story, but by working together, you can get a better picture. And realizing that in countries like the United States and the UK, there's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So you can expose it, there will be prosecution.
Right. So one of the things that I think when you were here, one of the other things you've written about was about inequality, the inequality in societies and the inequalities around the world. Do you think, this is something that we're experiencing now, the effects of that inequality, do you think journalists have done enough to report on global inequities and on making the links, as you say, the links between the developed world and the underdeveloped world, between private companies and the pillage of resources? We've done enough to show, to show our audiences, to show citizens the nature of this global economic system that we live in.
Well, the answer is one could always do more. So there's a tendency, I think, about journalists to sometimes blame themselves and say, well, if we only done more, things would be better. And the fact is, yes, there is always more to be done. But, and just to give you one example, the particular case that's been talked about by the comedian, and to say none of us can compete with the comedian in humor now, but it talked about the role of the Guptas in this. Well, there are also a law firm that's involved in this. The law firm is connected to an American law firm. Some of those connections have not been received sort of the public attention that they should have.
McKinsey is also connected.
And McKinsey, and so that American firms and English firms are very much connected with the corruption going on here. And that hasn't been brought out as forcefully in, it's a big South African story, right, but it should be also a big story in the United States and in Europe. And seeing the way in which these problems have become global. And one of the globalization is, has facilitated good things going across borders, but it also has facilitated bad things growing across borders. The Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers have exposed the extent to which this occurs, but there are a lot more of this, you might say, global cooperation that goes on between American law firms, consulting firms, and what goes on in Africa, and not just Americans, but also Europeans.
But certainly the global financial system is also to blame for the way money flows so easily across borders, the way there's a lack of transparency, as you said.
I think HSBC is involved in this particular state capture that South Africa is going through. So yes, I mean, the dirty money has to go across borders, and mostly it goes through our banking system. And these are pervasive. Money laundering occurs in the real estate sector. Again, I have gone about 10 minutes without mentioning Trump, but there is very clear evidence that Trump has been involved in, through his real estate, in this kind of money laundering. And one of the problems is that we have legal frameworks that, we've criticized Panama and we've criticized the other countries, but many of the United States does not have the kind of laws that prevent this kind of bad behavior. And we've done something in our banks, but we haven't done very much in real estate.
So when we were coming in, someone approached you and said, you're Mr. Globalization, and you were very prescient in looking at all of the impact of globalization, not necessarily the good part, but also sort of the dark underside of globalization. Can you talk a little bit about that dark underside and what we see now as coming from, you know, the way these global flows of money and how global flows of goods, resources, etc., and how that's sort of undermining our societies and causing a lot of anger and frustration among our citizens?
Well, it's a particular problem here in Africa because the flow of money, illicit money out of Africa actually is estimated to exceed the flow of money into Africa in the form of foreign aid and even foreign direct investment. So, you know, this kind of using secrecy, using various the paradise, the fiscal paradises are the way that people in developing countries all over the world, and even developed countries, take their money and move it to what they hope will be a safe haven. But the consequence of that is that it is depriving countries of their natural resources, of the investments that they could make that would promote their development. And so we you know, are constantly seeing evidences of this. Let me just give you one more example. Apple, that makes a very big pretense of good corporate responsibility. But as I say, you know, over and over again, the first element of good corporate responsibility is paying your taxes. Now, it was only actually in this case, it was the US Congress that exposed some secret agreements that were being made between Apple and Ireland that led to an investigation that exposed the fact that Apple was paying far less than 1% of its profits in Europe in taxes. And whatever your view about what the right rate of taxes is, it's more than 1%. And yet Apple made this big deal of being a good corporate citizen. And they said, the president said, you know, the CEO, we pay all the taxes that are due. Well, that was because they did a secret agreement with Ireland, the kind of thing that needs to be exposed by investigative reporting. And the effect of that secret agreement was to deprive the rest of the countries with tax revenues that they need for education and for infrastructure and for all other kinds of public purposes. So it goes back to your first question, secrecy. And those that are engaged, you know, Apple is not going to advertise. By the way, we pay only 1% or 1/10 of 1% in taxes. Look how good we are. Obviously, they're not going to say it. And once they get exposed, it puts them in a very vulnerable position. And it leads to changes in laws that say you can't get away with that.
So how does secrecy, what is the impact of secrecy on this, what we see as global inequality? So you wrote about like the 1% controlling the 40% in the US, and Apple is a US company. Is there a direct relationship between the lack of transparency and secrecy and the ability of people and companies with lots of money to stash away their funds elsewhere to the growing gaps between rich and poor that we see in our countries?
Yeah, very much so. And you know, one of the pieces of evidence that is the case, you ask the question, why do so many rich people put so much money, say, in the Cayman Islands? Now, one answer is that money grows faster in the sunshine of the Cayman Islands. Well, that's possible, but the real answer is that they go to the Cayman Islands and to Panama and to these other places for secrecy. You know, New York happens to be a good financial sector. They don't really know more about how to manage money in the Cayman Islands than they do in New York. It's not an advertising for New York, but it's you know, the reality is that they put their money there in order to engage in either tax avoidance, tax evasion, regulatory avoidance, regulatory evasion. There is no reason for the very existence of these secrecy, these paradise, offshore paradises. You know, there is no economic function that they perform. They are really engaged in regulatory and tax avoidance, the result of which is to create more inequality. And that's why it's so important, the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, to shine a light on this, because I think once we as a society begin to realize that they serve no social function at all, we will either shut them down or say, you have to comply with the same standards of transparency that we require in our financial markets.
We have the journalists here who worked on the Panama Papers. Can you raise your hand? And the Paradise Papers, there's several hundred journalists collaborating together. They're
Let me
all
congratulate
here.
you. You really, I can't tell you how important your work is. I really want to say that this kind of work is really important for our society, and it is really making a difference. And I know, you know, that's true of all the investigative journalists, you know, who are risking their lives, who are, you know, when there's a lot of money at stake, people often behave very, very badly. And so I just want to thank you on behalf of those of us who are engaged in trying to create a more equal society. What you're doing is really absolutely breathtaking and so, so important.
Let's talk about your work in Panama. The Panamanian government asked you to help them, you know, create a more transparent system, and that was not quite a happy ending. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, that experience? And
yeah, so the lesson experience that I'll tell at the end is, the big lesson is that everybody should do a better job of Googling. But the story is that Panama asked me to, what could they do to become a responsible, respectable financial sector. And they came up to Colombia, they did a very good sales job, and I believed them. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this was that I was very concerned about what the United States was doing and the way that we hadn't addressed some of these issues I mentioned before, particularly in the real estate sector. So I thought if I could get Panama to agree to high standards, then I could go to the United States and say, look, you're worse than a banana republic, and you have to reform. So I thought this would provide some momentum towards reform. So I agreed, and as we began our work, I said, one thing has to be clear, though, no matter what your reaction to our report, you have to make it transparent, because a report on transparency that was not transparent would have no credibility. Well, after we said this, we waited for a reply. We waited for first, we thought a long time, days, and then weeks, and then it was a couple of months. And then finally we got a reply, and they said, no, we're not going to be transparent. I was shocked, and we tried to get, to convey to their government that it would not be good for public relations, that if they thought that appointing a commission was good for public relations, having people resign over a lack of transparency in an attempt would be even worse public relations, but they didn't see that. And I and a colleague, Mark Blythe, who is from Switzerland, had been engaged in OECD work on anti-bribery, we had to resign. And afterwards, as I say, we discovered that I think it was really a failure to both sides to Google. If they had Googled me, they would have realized that I was not the person that was going to write the report that would give them the, and that I resigned from the World Bank when they gave me trouble, and I could resign from a Panama Commission. So that was the first thing. So they didn't Google me, but I didn't Google them because I found out afterwards that Fonseca, which was the big law firm that was engaged in Panama Papers, was a very good friend of the president of Panama, and in fact had been an advisor until all the problems were brought out in Brazil. And this illustrates, by the way, how investigative report in one country has spillovers for another. So the Brazil case of corruption exposed Fonseca. They had to resign from Panama advisor. And then it turned out that the co-chair of the commission, who was a Panamanian, and seemed to have good credentials. He had been the head of the Panama Canal board, something I could not have known at the time. The New York Times investigative journal did an article which exposed the corruption in the Panama Canal under his leadership. Yes. And so if I had only known about that, some of that was work was going on in Columbia Journalism School.
That's correct, yeah.
And so again, if we only talked to our colleagues a little bit more, we would have found out that there were some real problems.
Right. But something good came out of that. You produced sort of an alternative report with some recommendations for a more transparent global, information sharing system. Can you share some of those recommendations with us?
Well, I mean, the report did get an enormous resonance. There is now a committee that is called the Panama Papers Committee of the European Parliament. And they got very interested in these issues. In fact, almost half of the members of the European Parliament joined the committee because they thought it was so interesting. And they invited me to present our report to the European Parliament. And when I did it, as I say, more than half the members of the European Parliament showed up. It shows you the interest in this issue. And our recommendations ranged over a whole set of recommendations. I think the most important dealt with the beneficial ownership, making sure that when you, for instance, buy property, that the beneficial owner of the property is exposed. And that would be very interesting to know who the beneficial owners of a lot of the properties that were bought from Trump were. And I think there's been some good investigative journalism, some of it just relying on public record material, and you wouldn't want to deal with the people who are buying those apartments from Trump.
Right.
So I think that's enough about.
Well, after the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, it looks like offshore secrecy is becoming a myth, right? With these leaks and, do you think the offshore world, given the porousness we've seen, because of the Panama Papers leaks and the Paradise Papers leaks. Do you think that remains a viable world? Will it continue to be tenable? Or are we going to see really changes, as you said, you know, beneficial owners being named? Will we see sort of more drastic reforms in offshore jurisdictions? We're seeing a little bit of that now. Will that continue?
I think you're going to see a little bit of reform, but let me just say, you know, to really get at the problem, money laundering in the United States and the UK and some of the onshore centers has to be stopped. And with having a president being the money launderer in chief, it is very very difficult to believe that we're going to get legislation through that will have, for instance, this beneficial ownership provision. So the point, I think, that, you know, the message that I would give, this is going to be a long-term battle. I think you know, your first victories are really, really important. I think the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers are really, really important. But it's going to take constant going after what is going on. I think it has, you know, what is going on in America's real estate markets has to be exposed. The difficulty of getting dirty money returned from London is still a problem. So the secrecy has not been given up. And there will always, the business community will say, we can't function without secrecy. Let me just give you one example that highlights this. We were talking about natural resources, and the contracts between the U.S. government and the oil companies and the mining companies have been kept secret. Now, they say that they have to be secret because of commercial interest. But I say that, you know, who does the U.S. government represent when it signs a contract? It's the American people. So we are the other party to the contract. Can you imagine a contract that you would sign that you don't know, that you can't see? Obviously, it's absurd. So the battle over transparency continues. The Dodd-Frank had a provision that was the Financial Reform Act, had a provision requiring disclosure of money that was paid by American companies to countries for natural resources. And they challenged this in the court. And now that Trump is the president, he's advocating the repeal of this provision. So the reason I'm just emphasizing this is a long-term battle and has many, many, many fronts. So the good news for all of you investigative reporters, there's more than enough stories to keep you in business for the next 50 years.
That's good to know. You talked about, I mean, this is your point, really, that, as you said, we have governments all over the world that are off for and by the 1%. And we're seeing the consequences of that in sort of the upheavals we see all around us. Do you think we are on the cusp of some global upheaval as a result of this global inequity?
Oh, very much so. I mean, you've seen it in the Trump election, in the Brexit election, the fact that in France, Le Pen got 1/3 of the votes. You see it in the growth of, you know, I don't want to say that this is the only source of this right-wing movement of the fascist movements, but it has, I think, fed these movements, and it's played, I think, a very big role in feeding it. And so what is at stake in all of this is not just economics. You know, I think economics is important, but I think our democracy is more important. And so if we don't get this economics right, I think it really does represent a threat to our democracy. And in many ways, this brings us full circle. I think the real threat, the deepest threat that Trump and that ilk represent is a threat to our belief in, you might say, truth, in our epistemology, in what we mean. When they say, well, we have alternative facts, you can't deal with a world where there are alternative facts. One of the things about the media has been that it fact checks, it double checks, and science is about trust with verification. And so when you write a paper, you put out your data, other people check it, and there is this whole body, and you just can't say, I don't believe in climate change. There's been thousands of papers written that verified that there has been climate change. And so the point I want to emphasize is that I think the most destructive aspect of Trump and that movement is this alternative facts and what they're doing to undermine what a set of ideas that has defined our civilization since the Enlightenment. And what they are doing is forcing us to relitigate the Enlightenment every day. And that is really destructive of our society.
Well, in a way, the people in this room are the alternative to alternative facts. We're the ones who fact check, we're the ones who bring out new information, but also we've never been as vulnerable as an institution, the media, as we are now, with the failure of the media market, So what can, some people say that investigative journalism is a case of market failure because the market cannot support investigative journalism. What can be collectively done to find more support for the work that investigative journalists and fact-based, evidence-based journalists can do? Is there a market solution?
Actually, no. I think this is basically a market failure. It's providing a public good, something from which all of our societies benefit. And whenever you have a public good, there will be an undersupply in the market. So fundamentally, you cannot rely on conventional market mechanisms. There are a couple of obviously alternatives. Some governments have recognized the importance of investigative journalism. It's part of our democratic system of checks and balances. And therefore, those, a few societies in Scandinavia that are really committed to democracy have provided public support for the media. And I think that's really important, and I hope more countries will understand this fundamental market failure. Short of that, I think individual citizens, and fortunately there are some of the 1% who also are committed to democracy and who realize that markets cannot deal with this problem. And so individual citizens and wealthy individuals have been provided through foundations a lot of support. And to me, I think that's really very, very important, also another important source of support.
So Joe, you've been very prescient about looking at what globalization would mean for many of our economies and for the world. Can you look into your crystal ball and tell us, do you think things will get worse before they get better? Or are we on a downward trajectory of decline and into sort of populism and autocracy?
That's a terrible question.
That is a terrible question. I would like you to predict. Economists are supposed to predict, help us predict the future.
No. Economists never should make predictions because they'll be found out wrong. And if we make predictions, it should be Delphic. I'd say on the one hand and the other hand. So
we'll settle for a Delphic prediction.
Well, so my Delphic, I come from the Midwest of America, which is famous for its optimism. And so I have to hope and believe that Trump is as bad as it can get. And yet we know out there that there are worse people than Trump. It's hard to imagine, but in our nightmares, we do see it. But so the note of hope is that you were talking about inequality. There have been periods in America's history where we've had almost as much or as much inequality and corruption. The Gilded Age was famous for both inequality and corruption, and it gave rise to a response called the Progressive Era, where we changed our laws. We realized the dangers of concentration of market power and political power, and we had a whole set of reforms that addressed both corruption and inequality. So my hope is that all of you continuing your stories of investigative journalism, continuing exposing the dangers, the risks of Trump-like people to our society, to our democracy, to our economy even, that people will wake up and preserve our democracy, and in the long run, that a majority, not all, but a large enough majority of our citizens will realize the direction, the negative direction, and will pull us back from the brink. And so that just like America was pulled back from the brink in the end of the 19th century, America will pull back from the brink, South Africa will pull back from the brink, and countries around the world will move to a new progressive era with a new social contract with greater equality and less corruption.
Thank you, Joe. That's a very hopeful vision, and I hope, just like in the early 20th century, that muckrakers will play a role in making that change happen. Thank you so much for being hopeful and being inspiring to all of us.
Hey, I'm back. I don't think you guys actually clapped, and I don't think you guys actually realize how important you guys are, like at all. Like maybe like 1 or 2 claps, but if it's not for you guys are like on the front lines. Like if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't know things. Do you understand? It's like I wouldn't be able to write material if it wasn't for you guys like risking and doing the things that you do. It's like I'm grateful for you, but I'm like, I don't, give yourself a round of applause, guys. I mean, I listened to that thing, that was amazing. Like if you're gonna get into it, I mean, don't start off with Trump. You know, don't start off with Panama Papers. But if you get into investigating journalism, help a brother out. I want to know why my 67-year-old dad is at the mall 6 hours a day. Help me out, just a little bit. He's 67. I saw you, sir. I mean, I don't think you spend 8 hours at the mall. I want to know what my dad is doing there. He's got a heart condition. We can work this thing out together. Let's find out on Instagram. Let's see somebody that's like, hey, I want to tackle something. Start off with Salim. Start off with my dad. Then we get to Trump. Then we get to the Guptas. We don't start off big. I would never want to take on Trump. I tried to read his tweets. They don't make any sense to me. Nothing makes sense to me in the world of Trump. All I know what Donald Trump is doing for me as a Muslim person. I don't know how long he's going to stay in office, right? But at the end of his administration, Muslim people are going to be loved. the world will love us. They'll literally be like, yo, we are welcoming Muslim people. Come into our country now. They will be like, you see, you want to be Muslim, right? I'll convert you now. Repeat after me. La ilaha. And watch every Islamophobe going, Okay, cool. We've got some things. I love your beard. That's a very nice beard. That is that is proper Pakistani Islamabad beard right there. That is it. I mean, I stopped my show that is a good beard, dog. I'm very proud of you. So I don't know if you guys know, there's a couple of awards here tonight. Don't worry, it's not going to be a fiasco like the Oscars. Moonlight is not winning anything, I'll tell you that right now. There was someone like Moonlight. Moonlight's not winning anything. La La Land is not going to win anything. These awards are for you guys. I don't know if there's any money involved, but if you want to win an award, I do have a microphone. Come drop your name over there. We'll see. You could take one of these babies home. But to introduce the babies and the people that will win them, the Africa Czech team needs to come onto stage. I think it's Asan and Peter. There we go. There we go.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. It's with a great excitement that we announce the winners of the 2017 African Fact-Checking Awards. Africa Check is the continent's leading fact-checking organization. We have offices in 4 countries: Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Senegal, where we fact-check claims made in the public debate by politicians, trade union leaders, businesses, and the media. Our annual awards recognize and award students and journalists that have published work which sought fact from fiction. It's with great pleasure that we honor the following people for their work, which strengthen democracy and accountability across Africa. Africa Check's Executive Director, Peter Kenlife-John, has joined me on stage to award the prizes. This year, Africa Check introduced a student category for the first time in the history of the awards. And the winner is Moussa Ngom from Senegal. Okay, can I speak to you? That's quite better. The runner-up for the English Language Award is Addison Tamfu from Nigeria, from Cameroon. Let me just remind you that Addison Tamfu was the winner of the award last year. The runner-up for the English Language Award is already done, and the winner now of the English Language Award 2017 of the African Fact-Checking Awards is the Nixplex team from Kenya. Dorothy Ocheno. Dorothy Ocheno will be accepting the award on their behalf. And now, for the French Language African Fact-Checking Award winners. The runner-up is Delors Nesmond-Pi from Côte d'Ivoire. And the winner of the French Language African Fact-Checking Award for 2017 is Alexandra Jotan from Benin. Congratulations to all the winners. Félicitations à tous les lauréats. It's an honor to celebrate your important work this evening. May you be encouraged to do much more in this field. I would now like to hand over to Peter to say a couple of words.
As you can see, I'm not quite Senegalese. Well, very, very, very quickly, because I know everybody's time is very busy. I was very struck by Mr. Stiglitz's remarks about the assault on truth that is not unique to one country or one continent. Africa Check is a member of an international fact-checking community, the International Fact-Checking Network that is represented here. Have people from that organization, from fact-checking organizations in the UK, in Argentina, and elsewhere. We've just had a gathering of 14 different fact-checking organizations that have sprung up in the last couple of years and are launching now in countries, including those where their first task may be to try to check the accuracy of what is and what is not a coup. So the work that everybody's been doing is very important. I'd also like just very briefly to thank Eric GIJN, who did want to be here, who's the chair of the African Media Initiative, who chaired our jury, and to thank the sponsors of the awards, the AFP News Agency that I used to work for, and the Shuttleworth Foundation, which is obviously based in South Africa too. Thank you very much, and congratulations. Félicitations encore pour les gagnants.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, we're going to do more awards now. So now to introduce the Shining Light Awards, it is Mr. David Kaplan and Vice Chair Margot Smits. Round of applause for them.
Which one's my water? What are you doing? No, it's Hi. Actually, it's Margot's turn. I'm getting out of the way.
Is it my turn? I'm the only one who's not going to stand behind that thing because then you'll only see my hair. we're here in the middle of this evening of celebrating the remarkable achievements and the work of journalists worldwide, but I want you to take one little step back with me, because I want to pay homage to three people. Three people who've been very important to us and our movement as journalists, investigative reporters worldwide. Since, I'm a little out of breath because this is special to me too. Since many of us met last time in Lillehammer, that was 2 years ago in Norway, we lost two people. I want to commemorate with you two people who were very important to our movement, David Donald and Gavin McFadden. Gavin on the left, the director of the Center of Investigative Reporting, Investigative Journalists. Karina, where are you when I need you to pronounce this good? He ran the center in London for years. He was with the movement since the beginning. And then we want to remember David Donald, the man that many of us had the pleasure of being trained by in data journalism. He was a data journalist before the word was even there. He's called the trainer of trainers. And I want you to give them a warm applause because we miss them so much. But I'm pretty sure that these two men are looking over our shoulders as we do something else. We're going to start a new tradition. Because the board of the Global Investigative Journalism Network has decided to reward or give out a special award to recognize pioneering contributions to the global investigative journalism community. There's going to be a leadership award. And there's only one person who can get the first one. I would ask you to shout out his name. No, we won't. He is the co-founder of the Global Investigative Journalism Network. Yes, you can come walking up. You're sitting there, over there, I think, to the left. He's from Denmark. It's Niels Molvad.
Get up here, Niels.
Without Niels, we wouldn't be standing here, or without Brandt, but he's still, very much on the board. But thank you so much for 16 years of working in this movement that has truly, look around us, truly become a global movement. We applaud you.
It's not a farewell. I hope I'm allowed to come again next time. Thank you very much.
Wherever that may be. Thank you.
You're done. Congratulations, Nils. I'd like to ask up here GIJN's business manager. A lot of you are here, about 160 of you to be exact, because of Cora Moyano, booking your tickets, helping organize this conference. Hi, Cora. Cora's going to help us do the awards. Because she has been such a key player in putting this conference together and holding GIJN's finances together. Where are we? I'm disorganized again. We're going to give out, we're going to play the video, aren't we, Sarah? Yes.
Welcome to the 2017 Global Shining Light Awards. Tonight's 12 finalists were selected from an extraordinary 195 submissions from 67 countries. The finalists are Inside the Massive Extrajudicial Killings in Nigeria's Southeast and How the Onitsha Massacre of Pro-Biafra Supporters Was Coordinated, Premium Times, Nigeria. A 2-month-long investigation uncovered multiple mass graves, lending support to allegations that police and military forces targeted a minority ethnic group for abuse and extrajudicial killings. Following reports that included photo evidence, human rights groups demanded an independent probe and the army announced a new investigation. Justice, Tiger Eye PI, Ghana, Al Jazeera English, Insight TWI. A 2-year undercover investigation produced evidence of 34 judges and over 100 clerks accepting bribes to run a certain way in court cases. Following release of a 3-hour documentary and publication of newspaper reports, 25 judges were removed from office and judicial staff were relieved of their duties. Project number 1, Baladi TV channel, Iraq. When $200 million allocated for public schools in Iraq went missing, this reporter followed the money to a suspicious bank and overseas. The story exposed the magnitude of corruption in the country's Ministry of Education and led to a conviction and settlement that returned half the stolen money. Death in Service, BBC World and BBC Arabic Egypt. This investigation into the deaths of 13 military conscripts uncovered abuse and allegations of murder, while authorities worked to cover up evidence. After the story aired, one of the officers implicated was sentenced to 3 years in jail. The reporter was accused of undermining security in Egypt and forced to resign his job. Making a Killing, Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, an organized crime and corruption reporting project. This investigation uncovered an illegal billion-euro arms pipeline between Eastern Europe and the Middle East, financed by Arab states and Turkey, and diverted to ISIS and other extremist groups. The series sparked controversy across Europe and led to reviews and stronger monitoring by the EU and member states. Corruption and Organized Crime, Center for Investigative Journalism of Serbia. The team built 2 databases and produced a series that exposed Serbia's official fight against corruption as a sham. Records obtained through hundreds of Freedom of Information requests revealed that corruption prosecutions mainly targeted low-level public officials, dragged on for years, and often resulted in suspended sentences. Dirty Gold, Chasing the Trace of the London Bullion Market, Ojo Publico, Peru. Dirty Gold identified US and Swiss companies buying illegally mined gold in Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Chile. After publication, authorities in 4 countries launched investigations, resulting in multiple arrests. Wild Land, Violence, Devastation, and Death in the Heart of Brazil. O Estado de Sao Paulo. Journalists traveled 15,000 kilometers of government roads to investigate the theft of public land and timber in Brazil's Amazon region. The project built a database on 1,309 people killed in land conflicts and exposed human rights abuses, corruption, and elaborate profiteering schemes. Anbang series, Southern Weekly, China. In what industry insiders call a powerful expose of the ties between money and political power in China, the series on China's Anbang Insurance Group scrutinized the company's expansion overseas, complex deal-making, and shifting shareholder structure that included former Communist Party leaders. Pressured by authorities, the publisher removed the story from its website 5 days after publication. The Jungle Gangs of Jharkhand, Hindustan Times. Using data and interviews, reporters revealed how security agencies in India's Jharkhand state collaborated with rogue armed groups fighting Maoist insurgents. After publication, India's National Human Rights Commission called for an independent inquiry into how local communities were victimized by state-supported gangs. Gujarat Files, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, self-published, India 2016. The reporter went undercover for 9 months to record top officials speaking candidly about the 2002 riots in Gujarat, which left at least 1,000 Muslims dead. When a target of the investigation was poised to become India's Prime Minister, media houses got cold feet. Despite threats and surveillance, the self-published transcripts revealed complicity by India's top officials in the attacks. The Khadija Project, organized crime and corruption reporting project in collaboration with numerous outlets. Reporters from a dozen media outlets spent a year continuing the work of investigative journalist Khadija Ismailova, who was arrested on trumped-up charges in Azerbaijan. After months of stories exposing kleptocracy and corruption, much of it benefiting the ruling Ilev family, Ismailova was released from prison.
You'll notice the theme in all this, the Global Shining Light Award. This is our 7th time we're giving it out. It's given out at the Global Conference every 2 years since we began it in Toronto. It's given out only to investigative journalists in developing or transitioning countries who have done work under threat or duress. These 12 investigations, these 12 sets of reporters have done is extraordinary, and they've done it under enormous strain. They are the best of the best. We drew them, these 12 finalists, from a record 211 submissions from 67 countries. And the breadth and strength of what we saw, of what our judges saw this year was just extraordinary. We have, I think, 11 of the 12 finalists here in the audience. I wonder if we can ask them to stand and give them all a round. The judges had a tough time. You're all heroes. Cora? It's time to give out the awards. We give our judges, who are internationally respected journalists in a half-dozen countries, a lot of discretion in these awards. And because the competition was so strong, we're actually going to honor 4 of these stories. They decided to give out 2 certificates of excellence and 2 first-place awards. Cora?
We'll start with the first special citation for excellence to the Gujarat Files, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, Rana Ayub. Okay. We'll continue with the second citation for excellence to Making a Killing, the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, and the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project.
Come on up. Chaotic, but fun. Oh yeah, I'll do that. Okay, as I said, we have 2 first-place winners. Our first winner is Cora.
Project number 1, Bellari TV channel, Asad Al-Sasali and Tahir Khalid.
Yeah, I get to say that the winner is, right? Yeah, yeah. Well, we're long, long week. And the winner is?
Okay. Inside the massive extrajudicial killings in Nigeria's southeast and how the Onitsha massacre from Emmanuel Maya, Misikanu Mahmoud.
Like I said, it wasn't going to matter how we We're done, right? Congratulations, everybody. Wow. The judges noted how extraordinary and gutsy these investigations were, and some of them, you know, they were done by really lone reporters, and we just salute you for your courage, your guts, your stamina, and your contribution to investigative journalism. So I think our portion is done. Can I, Sarah? My cuester? I'm going to hand this back to... Yes, you. See me.
Well, that was a great thing. Let's now come to my favorite part of the night, where I stand by the podium and act like I have something important to say other than dinner is available on the lawns and it is free. And with dinner, I'm sure there's something nice to drink, if you know what I mean. I'm sure there'll be a band. It's time to have a joel, a jive. Please, outside, big white tents. We are going. Thank you very much. My name has been Simi Arif. Bye.